One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we're going to see how many of you are awake out there as we end up figuring out exactly what film we have in store for you tonight. So, Forrest, why don't you tell us a little bit about the film and whether you were awake during it.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so tonight's movie is 1983's Sleepaway Camp, written and directed by Robert Hiltzik, and it's set and filmed here in my home state of New York. It was actually, although I decided since I'm from here in New York and picking a New York horror movie, I decided that New York City was too obvious. New York City was a little, there's too many choices in it. So I decided to go north of the city to the Glens Falls area where Sleepaway Camp was filmed and took place. It's about a shy girl named Angela, who, along with her cousin Ricky, is sent to a summer camp, Camp Arawak, where as soon as they get there, campers and camp staff start getting picked off one by one, and nobody knows who's doing it. And with Hiltzik, as far as Robert Hiltzik, this was his for a long time. This was his first and only feature film as writer and director. He left the film business to become an attorney, and he didn't return to film until 25 years later when he directed the follow-up Return to Sleepaway Camp. Which was
retired.
Yeah, right. Or at least been a little more consistent, I would say. The movie was filmed. This movie though had a budget of $350,000 and made $11 million at the box office, which apparently Hiltzik was not in the 25 years between his movies. Hiltzik had no idea just how big or how popular it had become. They even did a Robot Chicken parody of it that Hiltzik made an appearance and was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe somebody knows about this movie." But anyway, I'm just gonna go around and get everybody's opinions on this, or their first impressions. I'll start off go clockwise from my point of view, from my POV. Brandon, is this your first time seeing Sleepaway Camp?
No, actually, I actually brought some show and tell items from my first experience with it. My first experience was actually when I was watching a video Cool Duder was doing years ago. And I used to like watching those because I got to see a lot of the giant collections that were there. I guess similar to what I've got behind me, I guess. And one thing that always struck me was this peculiar set that had this red cross on it. And I kept saying, I want this set. Eventually I did find it on eBay for about, I can't remember what it was, but it was a lot less than what I had thought it was worth. And that was the survival kit, which...
Looks a lot like the MASH box set, doesn't it?
And this one was actually brought out of print early because they had to reprint this with a different cover because the Red Cross got mad about this symbol being used. But this has the first 3 films, so I got to watch these 3 when I first got this. And of course I couldn't stop there. I also had to get 4 and Return to Sleepaway Camp so that I could, get the whole experience. There's another one out there, but it's totally unrelated, not worth mentioning in my opinion.
Well, actually, I have to say there was like they shot some footage for a fourth movie, but it never got produced.
Well, and they introduced a lot of the stuff in this. The Survivor. I wasn't really a big fan of this one, but I think a lot of it was just because of lost footage, and some of that footage is in that set. So I went ahead and I watched it mainly because of the rarity of the item. Sometimes we do that. Collectors like to get an item because it's rare, it looks really cool, and then we dive into the film. And I was really impressed by it. I enjoyed it. I've watched it twice since then, so about 3 times. It's the third time. So I still like it. I think the trilogy is a classic. When it comes to horror, love the camp horror things. Definitely has a lot of cool vibes. Looking forward to talking about it tonight.
And the campy horror as well.
Yes.
All right, Jake, is this your first time watching Sleepaway Camp?
This is definitely my first time watching it. Not entirely my first experience because you guys talk about it so much. I've certainly heard plenty about it. Even so, I kind of went in, I guess, kind of knowing what I was getting into, but still not fully. I was thinking it would be more bloody than it ultimately was, which I'm kind of relieved it wasn't. But overall, in all honesty, nah. I found this a subpar attempt to take the formula that we kept coming to again and again with Friday the 13th and maybe put a weirder twist on it. And it was weird. But I felt like this was a movie that if it was made today, it would have been shot down by so many different groups, it's not even funny.
Don't even get me started on how many people would be coming out of the woodwork on this movie.
Yes. It's now apparently the movie itself is apparently a cult classic in the LGBTQ community.
Is it really? Okay.
Really? I totally would not have thought that. I would have thought that would have been first in line for, like, suppression or whatever.
I would have thought they'd been a little displeased with it, too, but that was not the only group. I felt like the movie was an equal opportunity offender, and I guess in some ways, I gotta give it props for that. So it was watchable, and Brandon always goes on about not liking movies because you don't like the characters. This was a movie where I aggressively disliked most of the characters.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Anyway, so let's see. Mo, is this your first time watching Sleepaway Camp?
Oh, no, man. This is one that I've seen countless times. Definitely saw it at a really young age, which helped with the whole... It scarred me for life, bro. It's a movie that I frequently show people that don't watch horror movies very often, too. It's just so funny to get to the end and they're like, that wasn't that bad, and then holy shit. But it was impossible to ignore at the video store as a kid. I mean, it had that cover that's behind Forrest there with the sneaker impaled on the bloody knife, and like it had these gnarly like notes home from the kids, and I remember vividly like reading it and looking at it it took me a few trips to get up the courage to finally rent it. It turned out I'd seen worse stuff until those last few minutes. But, it's still a good, solid movie. I agree somewhat with what Jake's saying. Like, it is kind of it's just another riff on the Friday the 13th thing. I would say stuff like this and The Burning are probably more successful at being summer camp movies than anything in the Friday the 13th series. Mm-hmm. So as that, it's not half bad. You got some greasy characters in there. There's a lot of memorable stuff in the movie, and then stuff that still makes me go, like, what? Why would they put that in there? Like, we call them baldies. No.
Like I said in our comments, that guy made Wooderson look like perfectly decent. upstanding guy.
I'm pretty sure Wooderson would have told him that is not all right, man. You know, at least they turned him into hot dog water. It's just, you know,
he probably would have said something like, "You gotta let him, cook a little longer."
Yeah.
He was a big boy. You'd have to cook him for a while to cook him all the way through. But you know, it's just one of those movies that I guess repeatedly watching it over the years, yes, the impact of some of the stuff has kind of lost its, you know, impact. It's not very visceral, you know what I mean? But the ending is still just great, you know what I mean? It's hard not to like respect a good twist like that, because we've seen all the, you know, it was a dream ending or things like that. But never, we didn't get no plum smuggling in any of those other movies, you know what I mean? They should have basically just called this Plum Smugglers the movie, because that main fucking counselor guy had some really rocking shorts on too for the whole time.
Everybody had some rocking shorts and tops on.
They did, but that guy really...
This movie is like massively homoerotic, and I think perhaps unintentionally so in many ways.
It was
and in some ways intentional, because there is some gayness with the two dads or whatever in the flashback, but we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. Welcome. This is actually, I think this is our first show with you. My first show with you.
Mm-hmm.
Is this your first time watching Sleepaway Camp?
No, I've actually seen it countless times, really. First saw on VHS probably in the 90s. It was in the 90s. I thought it was kind of had an interesting play on sort of like gender and gender roles and expectations with the way they kind of did things, and
definitely.
I liked how they used a lot of the shadows in some of those parts, like some of those murder scenes, and and I really liked how like the whole ending was shot with the way they, you know, the way they played that, and another thing I thought was interesting, and I don't know if anyone else noticed it, how like the color scheme, like red seems to be kind of a sort of a dominant like color. I don't know, that was just a weird thing I always noticed. Like a lot of red jacket, red, you know, towel, red, a lot of different red in certain scenes. I don't know. I mean, I thought it was like, I don't know, an interesting the way they did it was just very I don't know, different. I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess some people kind of can interpret it as being very I don't know, not PC, but I don't know. I thought in some ways
problematic.
What's that?
Problematic, I think was the word you were looking for.
Yeah, but I mean, I think in some ways there's like parts of it that kind of I don't know how to explain. I guess it kind of comes across as sort of like a trans person, and sort of their like awkward experiences with people and their struggle in a weird way. I mean, I know the lady's like a killer, but it kind of has that in certain scenes. I thought that was kind of different for.
And they don't portray Angela like the trans element of it is why she's a villain. You know what I mean?
Right.
So maybe that's why it gets a pass. Where something like Buffalo Bill, like his transformation is insane. Yeah. You know, like this, it's very much just a product of her upbringing. She's raised that way. What's that?
Yeah, it's Ventura.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good example. One I think where it sort of deserves some of the heat. This, she would have wanted to kill these motherfuckers anyways. They ran him over with a boat. You know?
Yeah, she was more. I thought they kind of made her somewhat more sympathetic in some ways. Like, you know, she wasn't like a evil, cold. Yeah, I don't know, like an over the top kill, like you were saying with the Silence of the Lambs with the. That character. She had aspects that were likable and I guess positive, and
I'll defend Silence of the Lambs. I'll defend that till the day I die, largely because, admittedly, it is kind of a blink you miss it line where Hannibal's like, that he's saying that he's not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is. He tries to be, because for him it's more about the transformation aspect of it rather than being like the full breadth of what that really means. But you're right, though. I mean, I think relative to the time, Felissa Rose does give that person, Angela, does give her some more humanity that perhaps you wouldn't have really seen you wouldn't have seen a lot of trans characters in film anyway at that time, and then the few times that you did in the 90s and onward, it wasn't necessarily in the best light, and certainly not nuanced and everything, which is not to say that this is like, a glowing version of it by any stretch of the imagination, but like we said, there are some more elements to it that you can mine for humanity and gravitas and dignity and all that kind of stuff than you might have seen relative to the time.
All right. Actually, on that note, Dane, is this your first time watching Sleepaway Camp?
Yes and no. So no, in the sense that I watched the Cinema Snob review of it a lot of times, and that's one of his best episodes by far. And he highlighted all the really big scenes, and there were so many quotes from his review that popped up in my head during the film itself. Like during the scene where there's like, what are we gonna do with 50, the skinny dip with 15 guys and only 5 girls? Then his line was, if we get rid of the 5 girls, then we have a plan, and he did it in that really snide classic Cinema Snob voice that was so great. But yeah, as far as watching the whole film in context, this was a first time watch. I think, I'll say it like this, I don't really think it's technically a good movie, but I think it has a lot of things about it that are certainly memorable, and I can appreciate why it has a fan base the way that it does. Certainly impressive ROI relative to its budget and everything. And I do think Felissa Rose does a good job. I think that I'll say this, I thought it had more elements in its favor as a movie than the first Friday the 13th did, even though this came out in the wake of Friday the 13th. Now, Friday the 13th got better as it went along, because it got more of the elements that we kind of know Friday the 13th to be. It got that gradually, but like just comparing it to the first film, which again was a small budgeted movie at a campground, large ROI, started a franchise, blah blah blah. I do think this had more memorable elements to it than the first Friday the 13th did. Certainly in the character department. Now, memorable does not always mean consistent or necessarily good, because like I do think the acting's pretty uneven. It works on the level of like comedy, because I think I would argue it's even more of a kind of foul-mouthed comedy that happens to also have a slasher plot. It's definitely more memorable on that level. Now, the characterizations are very kind of over the top in a lot of ways, which again, for a comedy of this sort, it can work. It's just not necessarily consistently that way, because like Angela's cousin, he plays it pretty straight, and he plays his role pretty, just solid. It's what you'd expect from that character. But then, like, my favorite character, their aunt, goodness, no, that wouldn't do at all. Like, I don't know why, she made me kind of smile, because I was like, this person is so, robotically eccentric that I'm like, I want to see a whole movie about her. So it's uneven, and like we said, there's a lot about it that has not aged well in the least, particularly in the trans side of things, because and I mentioned sort of facetiously that I would have thought that something like this would have been first in line for people to like get their torch and pitchforks out retroactively. But I think partially it's because, it's not as high profile as, say, Ace Ventura or something like that. Yeah. And also because, it is a product of its time, and, yeah, it's got that. It's got the kind of casual attitudes towards like the head of the camp, you know, getting it on with one of his counselors who knows how old she is. Plus, like, there are just a lot of elements about it that you're like, oh, that would be, you know, unsavory to like that. Plus, like, the kind of suppressing of the murders and the whole pedophilia thing and blah, blah, blah. Which kind of makes it what it is, take it or leave it. But, like, I do think it would not work today. But I will say two cinema snob things, and then I'll pass it on to someone else. But one of which, a line of his that rang throughout my head in the whole thing was, one line was, "You are sued! So fucking sued!" Which is true, because it's like, the instant one of those campers dies, the whole thing, they're sued out the ass in the real world. And then the other line, which is not a line, but it's a paraphrase of something he would have said about the pedophilia thing. "I'll stick with real movies about pedophilia, like Happiness, thank you very much." Which that came in the mail recently. Another film that's rather hard to come by these days.
Okay. And Dustin, this is your first time watching Sleepaway Camp.
No, so I first saw Sleepaway Camp during my kind of horror renaissance in 2012 when I started getting into horror as a genre and I wanted to hit all of the big bullet points. And this was one of the ones I saw later, and it didn't really stick with me the way it stuck with a lot of other people. I don't know what it is, but I just find the kills in this series like exceptionally gross. Like, Sleepaway Camp itself is the best one, because I don't want to get too off topic and talk about the sequels too much, but it gets pretty disgusting in the sequels.
For sure. Kind of shitty, you could say.
So you don't.
I hate the sequels so much.
You don't want to be a lobster boiled pederast? Or you don't want death by bees or anything like that?
No, that's kind of easy.
In this first one, the kills are fine. They're not just, but in the other sequels, they just get like viscerally disgusting.
Yeah, and I did like the snake out of the mouth thing. That was nice.
Like torture.
I don't know that one at the I can't remember which one it was, where she basically buries the person up to their neck and runs them over with a lawnmower. Can't get better than that.
They did that in Caligula, and that wasn't even a lawnmower.
But anyway, back to Sleepaway Camp. So I've definitely gained more of an appreciation for this movie after having seen it multiple times. I also want to mention, like, this movie has really difficult gender politics to navigate. And there's an article on Bloody Disgusting, Sleepaway Camp, The Elephant in the Room, by Alice Collins. And so it's an article kind of addressing those gender politics, written by a trans person. So I think we should include a link to that somewhere, because it's good for getting that perspective, which I think is important if we're gonna, evaluate this movie.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot of things about this that are sort of troubling or problematic by today's standards, or just like, they were problematic then, but they just weren't brought to the forefront as much as they are now, or like...
the thing with the chef is pretty not subtle.
Oh, exactly. Well, but also, like, I'm thinking of, like, there's a lot of awkwardness surrounding just teenagers, trying to navigate each other's nether regions, as well as, the ways in which the authority figures in this thing, that they're way too chummy with the students and way too they cross a lot of lines in this, and it's just one stray touch today would be like, the whole place would be shut down. And so it does tell you how much things have changed, but also how much the stuff that would have gone on at a camp like this in real life. Just think about how prevalent that sort of thing might have been even without the murders and stuff. It's like that's partially why we have the reaction we have now in the first place, because of decades of stuff like that going on.
But overall, wrapping up my impressions, I like this movie after having seen it a couple of times and really having a chance to kind of get it. I've tried to like the sequels, but I just can't enjoy Sleepaway Camp 2. Like, I don't know what it is, but Sleepaway Camp 2, like, disgusts me on a deep level.
I love 2 and 3. They're I don't care for 4 as much, but I love 2 and 3.
3 is palatable.
But, fair criticism there, Dustin. It is gross. Unsavory.
Is there anything else? Was that it, or?
Nope.
That was it for me.
Okay, David. Is this your first time watching Sleepaway Camp?
No, this is not my first time watching the film. This is my third or fourth time watching it. The first time I watched it, I was like, wow. It was like kind of one of those films like you didn't expect the ending, and then the second time around seeing it, then you're kind of like noticing that this film is like the first film that you actually have some female bullies in the film. Actual female empowerment bullies, the ones that you really want to hate and really won't care about them when they end up having their ending. So to me, this was like the first film in a slasher film where you really get some female antagonists in here, where you have to kind of look at it from a female perspective too, not just the gender roles that are going on. I think it's more of a bully story than it is a slasher film in essence. Even though there is like murders happening and stuff like that, and that's kind of like background material for this film. But I really enjoy the outcome and the wow factor of this film, mainly because you never see this kind of thing, in horror film at this point in time. And I have to agree with Dane here that this film, for a slasher film dealing with a camp-like setting, it really outdoes the first Friday the 13th as far as films go. It's not that I hate Friday the 13th in any way, shape, or form, but that first one was kind of rough for the Friday the 13th.
I honestly, the Friday the 13th is more notable for what started than as a movie. As a movie itself.
Not to mention that in this one, you actually have a camp full of kids, and they're doing normal summer camp stuff, which is more than we can say for the first Friday the 13th.
Most Friday the 13th.
Exactly. So it's like, hey, at least it's doing what it's advertised to do, like the camp is. And, Dave brings up an important point with, we talked about sexual politics a bit, not just in the trans stuff, not just in the teenagers trying to figure out, who they are as young men and young women, in terms of, like, hetero relationships or whatever, but you see a lot of intersex competition. Like the ways in which the boys compete with each other, the ways in which girls compete with each other, and how that manifests into bullying, into trash talking, into all of these other kind of maladaptive behaviors that are, you could, if you wanted, if you were like a cultural anthropologist or something, you could probably use this as like a microcosmic sort of almost cartoon version of that.
Yeah, only one I've seen that's done something similar on the bullying aspect, as far as the female bullying, would be Carrie, which had a lot, and that was 76, so it did.
Carrie definitely predated this as far as female bullying, but as far as in slasher films, it's
not a slash. Yeah, unless you consider they saved all the slashing for the end.
I find this particular film and these particular bully situations a very good contender for the bullying that goes on in Carrie, and the reason why is because it's not just one situation; it's several situations where they're like trying to get her to talk. She's not really a talker, you know. She obviously, and the thing about Felicia Rose is she's very expressive with her eyes. And I'm not sure if there are any films that I can say that I have seen where someone can just tell a story with their eyes. I mean, let alone Dracula and his eyes. I mean, he's just, it's not, but to me, I feel like she has very expressive eyes. What do you guys think?
Well, you gotta be very... I mean, the character's got to be silent for like 50% of the film, so you got to do something with it. Otherwise,
she's count all her lines on your fingers.
But she does a lot of really good subtleties with her, not just her eyes, but like just her overall facial expressions are very. They're very subtle. You can tell when she's shy, when she's disappointed, when she's, you know, and it's not even like it's a huge departure in each. She's kind of the opposite of her aunt, where like her aunt, you know, wears her emotions on her sleeves, and her emotions are, I just got off my meds, you know. But like she has very clear emotions, and yet. She does not have to change her facial expressions that much. So that speaks a lot to her talent level at that age. In many ways, I think she was taking it much more seriously than she necessarily had to, as opposed to, say, it wasn't Meg, it was the other one, the primary female bully that, you know, steals everybody. Yeah, Judy, who steals everybody's man. Who I remember it was, again, in the Cinema Snob review, he at one point he was like, did this turn into the Real Housewives of Sleepaway Camp all of a sudden? And she totally looks like she belongs on like a newly pubescent version of a Real Housewives in New Jersey kind of show. Ben like totally again wears her emotions on her sleeve in a way that's kind of over the top, but that also makes Felicia Rose's acting stand out even more, because I think she does do a legitimately good job and a better job than she necessarily had to given the material.
I do think there's a reason that Karen Fields has very few acting credits. Although I found it interesting that apparently Judy was supposed to be played by
See you in St. Louis!
Great, and a couple of the others I thought did a very good job with what they were given, but some of them, that aunt bugged me. I don't know what her deal was, but she bugged me.
That should do it all.
I thought to myself, we were watching it the other night, and my first thought was, either she's a brilliant actress bringing this role across to be creepy, or she's just incredibly bad at what she's doing.
It almost seemed to me like she was. It almost seemed to me like she was doing like a bad impression of Willy Wonka. You know,
a little bit. Or like
I think it's
one of the reviewers that I looked up on Wikipedia. One of them, I think it was on the Rotten Tomatoes consensus actually, was saying that it was like a 80s slasher film that was punctuated by moments of like John Waters-esque weirdness, and I do think that she definitely played it like she was coming from a John Waters movie.
I can see that.
Definitely.
And I think she would, like, that kind of character would be great in a John Waters movie, or like something like that, where like the characters are like really bizarre. But she does stick out like a sore thumb, admittedly.
I've always had the impression that it's kind of a combination of what Brandon was talking about. Like, she is fucking terrible, but she probably thought she was brilliant. 'Cause it feels like you're watching a different movie for a minute, and I just, in my head, I've always imagined the dude trying to tell her how to do it, and she's like, shh, I know what I'm doing. And she just, fucking sent it with the weirdness, you know?
Is she related to Tommy Wiseau by any chance?
I don't know, but it's, whenever that lady's on the screen, I always like it, man. She's a trip.
Actually, Chris, what were your thoughts on those?
Jacob, you're just a little chicken.
What were your thoughts on those two characters? The mother and, of course, our Felissa Rose's character.
Well, I mean, I thought the Felicia Rose, I thought did a good job. I mean, I guess, yeah, facially, like was mentioned before, her facial expressions, but like her, even her overall body posture, I guess, the way she kind of would slump over, and she kind of have her hands and her arms, you know, pulled inward, and yeah, I thought she did a good job in expressing, you know, loneliness and anxiety, and you know, and I guess as far as the other character goes, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It would seem kind of John Water-esque, I guess, in a way.
Gotta love that. Gotta love that.
What's that?
Gotta love that delivery.
We need to hit some John Waters.
She almost seemed kind of like they were kind of making her sort of like not androgynous, but like kind of blurred between like masculine and feminine in a way. I don't know if that came across.
I thought I was going to that.
I always thought that she was like like she was off her meds or something. Like she definitely.
I think she's on too many meds.
or that, either one.
She's a doctor, so.
She's dipping into the supply.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, point being that she's unbalanced in whatever way. But like I'm with you, Brandon. Like I could see it either way. I could see this actress as like legitimately brilliant, or I could see her as just totally way off the mark and didn't realize it, thus making her performance brilliant but coming at it from the other direction.
It almost seemed kind of like a drag performance, I guess.
Yeah.
To me, I did. I don't know, that kind of way she did the role and everything.
Either way,
that also
to it too. That's kind of got that element, right?
Well, that does kind of tie into
as like a madam at a drag show, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That does tie into the John Waters-esque feel to it, because obviously, you know, Divine was the star of most of those films, and so thus, you know, that kind of allows for a more deliberately over-the-top acting style, which doesn't always gel with what everybody else is doing in the movie, because again, like, most of, like, the kids, especially, like, her cousin, I think he played it very straight. Most of the other kids and counselors play it very straight.
Most of them are a little over the top, but you know, not
behaving
that,
like actual humans. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I mean. Like, they had heightened hormones, you know, and they played it like that. But that's you know, part of what the movie's about, is that it is about teenagers learning what their nether regions are for and how to bump ugly, so to speak.
I think that's part of what summer camp was just about, man. Back in those days, at least.
You know, it'd be a good double feature.
That contrast with our boiling pedophile there, who he definitely plays it like a kind of cartoonified version of a pedophile, because, like, you know, love or hate happiness, like the version, forget it, Dylan Baker. What he is able to do with that, you know, role of a pedophile, like he's able to, I think, really get to the core of what would make a person like that tick, and it's a really nuanced performance, and it's unsettling, but it's also like you get a window inside of his mindset in a way that you don't in most portraits of that sort of person. And in here, it's sort of like he's playing it more broadly, and and he does get taken out of the movie pretty quick, but it's like,
Yeah. Turn that pedo.
I mean,
into a
that
pop
Baldies
sticker.
line, my goodness. Actually, you know what's a good movie to pair this with?
right.
Red Hot American Summer.
I was thinking
I'd say,
that, yeah.
I would say the other. Actually, I would say Meatballs.
Oh,
Yes, dude. I fully support the idea of like mixing in those camp comedies with slasher movies that
Yeah.
are set at camps. I'm doing it.
Actually, a few years ago, I did a whole marathon of summer camp movies, including this, Friday the 13th Part 6, since that was the only one where the camp was active. Meatballs, Heavyweights, Red Hot American
That
Summer.
Camp Nowhere.
Camp Nowhere,
It's a potential summer topic. We have
That
to
is one that probably will get put forward, yes.
Oh yeah,
Sounds
that's one of the many reasons why Part 6 of Friday the 13th. That's one of the many reasons why that's my favorite one, and the one that I would put forth and say, yes, this is a legitimately great film. Well, it's because it's like, hey, finally the camp's actually functioning. Finally, it's functioning. You know.
We can't even get it set up before everybody dies. You know.
I know.
So,
A couple of sons of bitches didn't even take place at the camp. Like,
Right.
it was just at a cabin or some shit.
well, since I seem to have already gone headlong into character, we got to talk a little bit about, I think,
I actually didn't even do my first impression.
Go for it.
Oh, sorry, dude. Yeah.
All right. Actually, but no, for me, this is definitely not my first time watching it. Actually, I remember. Okay, so as a kid, I remember seeing the movies at video stores, like the VHS boxes, with like right behind me, with the knife impaling the sneaker, or with the cover of the second movie with Angela having like every other slasher villain's weapons on her backpack.
Yeah. That's, wow.
Yep.
Lied to.
Sleepaway Camp 2, one thing. It does have a cool cover.
Yeah,
It really does. That
Well,
chick's not even in the movie, which is awesome.
Yeah, actually, I would say it even had a kick-ass soundtrack. Because this movie alone introduced me to Anvil. But actually,
Animal rules.
yes, but I saw the sequel. I actually saw the sequels first. I remember seeing them on Showtime late at night when I was in high school. But then the first movie I had read I had read about it on message board. I didn't see it until I was like in 12th grade. I read about it on message boards, and then I had actually read some spoilers that Angela is really trans, but then I went and actually rented the movie itself from Hollywood Video, and so I knew going in I knew how it was going to end, but I didn't exactly know how it was going to really they were really gonna show everything. They were gonna show everything.
The whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. Well, or I was
Frank
saying
and the beans, boy.
exactly comparison because I was saying.
Now you talk about as far as sexual politics and stuff, and also what goes into making films and the behind the scenes drama and blah blah blah. We often, rightfully so, we often talk about the kind of traumas of shooting sex scenes in a way that's not okay, or the excess of female nudity in comparison to male nudity, all that stuff. Now this is a notable exception. There's quite a lot of male nudity in this, and quite a lot of kind of homoerotic
movie.
Yeah,
the men dress. I swear the men dress more revealing than the women do in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, this is
You had to have the
crop
shorts had to be
tops and
shorts. Do had to be curly.
I know. Well, it's
No sleeves. That's what I'm
this
saying.
is up there with Top Gun as far as most unintentionally homoerotic movie of all time.
Yeah. I still think Top Gun takes the cake for the literally gayest movie I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, it's way up there, but but this is up there too. I mean, it's not to be discounted, and I really do wonder how much of that was on their minds. But it's again, you talk about the kind of intersex competition aspects of things. I mean, whenever you get the heavy kind of gender segregations or whatever, then you get a lot of behaviors that to the outsider might seem kind of homoerotic, but they while they're doing it, they don't think of it that way, but you're like, oh man, it's all over the place. And you see that with the guys, like, all over this movie. Not so much with the girls, which again you would see a lot of that in a lot of other horror movies and a lot of other slasher movies. It's the old, spin the bottle at the sleepover, oh, we're gonna kiss each other, that whole thing. You'd see a lot of that. But again, kind of refreshing looking at this, you see the other side, and it's like, that's actually, that makes it stand out relative to the films of its time, and even now.
Yeah. Anyway, actually, I did. So I saw it in 12th grade. I rented it from Hollywood Video. It was kind. I thought it was like kind of. At first, I was like, this is definitely. I definitely noticed the homoeroticism right away, and I kind of chuckled at all the pranks. But the ending was just like a holy shit. I knew it was happening, but I didn't. But the way, I was not. But it was still not expecting it. And then, and a few months later, I rented it again but this time I watched it but this time my sister was with me when I was watching it. Well, actually, my sister and my aunt were with me when I was watching it, and I think I traumatized both of them. Last time I already knew the ending was coming, but no, they did not expect it, and they were. I traumatized them. Ended up buying a few months, and I ended up later that summer. Ended up buying the box set, but unfortunately, I didn't get the one that Brandon has. I have the one that was after post Red Cross lawsuit.
Yeah.
Actually, that box set is the very first item I ever bought from Amazon.
They're cool box sets regardless, because they're pretty awesome. I think that one also has the extra disc in it that had the lost footage from 4.
The 20 minutes.
Is that the Anchor Bay edition?
Unfortunately, mine does not have the disc with 4.
I know that there was one of them that did. I just didn't know which one.
Chris was asking if that's the Anchor Bay edition.
I think it is the Anchor Bay one.
Yeah,
I actually do have the one with the cross.
The original, then that's not the uncut version. The actual Anchor Bay version is actually edited.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's the VHS and then the Shout Factory are the uncut, because the Anchor Bay was known to be edited. I remember that.
So the selling point on that, 20% more dick.
Yeah, it was the UK cut or something. I believe, the UK cut that trimmed a little bit of the violence scenes somewhat.
Okay.
Some other stuff.
Well, and that's
all right.
the Cinema Snob brought that up too. That the most widely released versions of the movie were heavily edited, except there was all the man ass was still in there. All the pasty white untanned man ass that contrasts with their otherwise
they didn't
tan
tan
bodies.
under the suits back then, man. Tan
I guess not.
A fact of life of 80s nudity.
I guess so, but it does make you wonder, which I looked it up, so most of the actors in this, unlike movies of its time, and even today, unlike most movies that deal with young people, the actors in here were largely adolescents, as opposed to, especially, these days, and especially, even more especially on television, they tend to be played by people who just turned 18, or maybe they're in their early 20s, but they could pass for it or whatever.
I would say watch the sequels, and you wonder who's supposed to be a camper and who's supposed to be a counselor.
Yeah. Now there were a few counselors that I was like, how old are they? Because they looked either too young or too old for what you would think they would be. But then I think about again the the blindfolding and the boop, right in the old patootie.
Yeah, it's classic stuff.
Yeah, and then you think about how the hell did they do that back then, and how the hell could you do that today, and blah blah blah. So it's one of those, the naive days of independent filmmaking from decades ago, but it's just that's another standout feature of the thing, for better or for worse.
Did anyone notice the scene? I guess where Judy gets killed. The way they, I don't know if you see him standing at the door. That they have her cousin Ricky, they almost suggest that he could have been involved in the killings because they have him standing. It's a quick, subtle sort of shot, but
they put his cousin
have
as
him
a red
standing there
herring.
in the wig.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I noticed that.
I think the hands of the killer were Little Ricky or whatever. I think I read that somewhere.
Which there were more attempts at red. Like again, I watched this in the Star review first. In the review, the way he cuts it together, it makes it seem like there aren't as many red herrings as there are in the movie in context. And watching it in context, I was like, they are attempting. They're attempting to have quite a few red herrings, and some of them you could maybe kind of sort of buy. Some of them are kind of, I think, intentionally ridiculous. But they do make their pathway pointing to Angela. They make that pathway pretty, I think, clear, but without it necessarily. You're not quite getting ahead of the movie, or at least the target audience wouldn't necessarily be getting too far ahead of the movie. And even if they were, then they most definitely were not expecting the shocker ending.
Because I have to say, for me, I felt like Angela was such an obvious suspect from the start that there was it was just so obvious. It was like, how can there even be a mystery here? But then on the other hand, you kept getting these things building and building. Well, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. And then finally you get that twist at the end where it is her, but it's not. So it's kind of like, so there was a twist, there was a reveal. So it was interesting because they kind of, and that was probably one of the things I had mixed feelings about, was I felt like they made it too obvious, and yet they tried really, really, really hard to, into their credit, they kind of did it at times.
Yeah.
And what I understand is that apparently part of the reason for Ricky standing in for her had nothing at all to do with the movie so much as, I read that, her mother wouldn't let her be involved in the killing scenes, so they had him stand in for those scenes. Yeah. And it was like, okay, well, that's an interesting thing we'll have to work around, but they used to, he
could have asked for blood relatives, so
they did look very close. Well, the interesting thing I think with on the one hand they were very smart, which again you wouldn't do a twist like that today, but just on a storytelling level they were wise to have there be a twist that was more subtly set up than most people, certainly at that time, would have at all suspected. And it was actually woven in pretty subtly so that, you might have expected her to be the killer, but, that twist, there's, the audience at the time, there's almost no way that they would have suspected that, even though now looking at it, you could see some of the breadcrumbs that maybe wouldn't have been as readily obvious at the time. But that also does beg the question, as we are opening up the cultural and cinematic landscapes to people of different underrepresented groups and blah, blah, blah. As we are doing that, it does kind of beg the question of what if you had a horror film, slasher or not, what if you had a horror film where a trans person was the protagonist and the trans person is suspected of being the killer but turns out to be the hero, and part of the quest is, having to overcome those suspicions or those, or you could talk about sort of the initial feelings that a person would have at that age, the initial struggles and all that stuff. I mean, that would have to be a story that would be told preferably by an actual trans person, but I think there's ample room for that to be told. Certainly, I've never seen that done before.
Yeah. One point I wanted to make for those people who want to get in on the uncut material. one of the things, and I kind of hate this about Shout Factory, but of course the first one you can get the upgraded Blu-ray with all the stuff pretty cheap. But if you want to get the sequels, so if you ever want to get in on the sequels of a horror series that are being released, you better get it on release because those will go out of print. They always let the sequels go out of print, and then they leave the first one in print. Candyman is an example. There are others. I think the Silent Night, Deadly Night is an example of that for its sequels.
The worst example of that is the Slumber Party Massacre series.
Yeah.
Because Slumber Party Massacre 2 and 3 are on a double pack that went out of print years ago. I think it might have actually been the first thing that Shout put out that went out of print, and that's like $100 now. It's one of the most expensive Shout titles I know about.
Yeah.
And what Brandon's referring to is Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 went out of print at some point last year and have exploded in price. Like, I sold a spare copy I had without a slipcover for $50.
Yep. So if you want that extra footage, I don't know how much they cut from 2 and 3, but 1 at least you can get pretty cheap. Yeah.
As far as I know, the Anchor Bay, I think it was just the first one that was the edited print on the Anchor Bay version. I think it was just the first movie. They didn't, as far as I know, I've never heard about the sequels being edited. I think it was just the original.
Yeah, I feel like those other two were probably straight to video. Yeah, I don't think they played.
Like it. Yeah,
and they weren't even shot in New York; they were shot in Georgia.
Yes, so they're just pretenders.
Didn't even bring back Felicity Rose. All right, so I guess we talked a bit about the sexual politics, the camp. I should have the sexual politics. Aunt Martha. I guess we've talked about quite a bit about the pedophile, about the would-be pedophile cook.
Right.
I guess as far as the other characters,
Mel's pretty badass.
Mel,
like how he just
that was the one I was going to bring up. Yeah.
Yes.
Just going batshit.
Apparently, Mike Kellen's last role, he apparently died of cancer just after this came out. But
actually, he died before it even was released.
Oh, before it was. Okay.
We saw him in Just Before Dawn, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he was.
Oh yeah.
I believe the other cook dude.
good collection.
Is James Earl Jones' dad, I think, isn't he?
Or his brother, or might have been his. Actually, he is James Earl Jones' father.
Huh.
Wow.
Okay.
Darth Vader's daddy right there.
Robert
yeah.
Jones. Okay.
Well, the guy who ran the camp, he was kind of a sleazy character as far as like, but in a different sort of way, because he, is all about covering up those murders. He's all about, getting it on with the counselors and that kind of stuff.
and
Which actually, no one really responded when I put this query up, but I saw this guy as a live-action equivalent of Moe from The Simpsons. Like, I was like, if Moe was running if Moe ran a camp, it would be this guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So when we're talking about when we talked a little bit about the cook, I wanted to point out something about the pot that they used to boil corn.
It was a big pot.
Big pot. So, okay.
Not a lot of kids to feed, so...
I used to be very familiar with summer camps. I mean, I'm an Eagle Scout. That's what we had to do. We had to go to summer camp a lot. But I never saw a pot that big. Like that. I know they exist, but has anybody ever worked with a pot like that? Like, how do you empty that? And how do you fish the corn out?
That looks like something you'd cook
like
a lot of...
on the side.
You'd cook like a lot of lobsters in a pot like that.
Brandon, I think you used the right language. I think you would fish it out. I could see you just kind of sitting there with a deep sea rig, just kind of...
They had a couple I've seen that were even close to that side had like a little release valve, like on the bottom, on like one of the sides. So it's possible that it had one.
That would make sense.
That would make sense, yeah. I guess for that one, if they really wanted to, they could just like lift it up by the top and kind of put it on like a conveyor belt or something, like a dolly, and then tip it over like inside.
The best way to empty it really is to just pour it on a pedophile, though. I think they did the...
That's what they do. That's like the camp. Just, like, okay, who's the pedophile? And they just dump it on them.
Yeah, which that was one of the lines...
Get back in here, Ralph. It's time to empty the corn pot again.
That was one of the lines from the Cinema Snob review where specifically those makeup effects. It was like, you paid a lot of money for your big makeup effects scene, so by God you're going to show it just because of how long that scene lasts, where he's like writhing in pain and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, yeah, that out of all the scenes, that one does go on for a while, and it's partially because that makeup effect-wise, that's probably the best that they got. So it's like I understand that it's like that's essentially your big set piece, so you're gonna show it off.
But it cost almost as much as the corn, dude.
They did air bladders and everything. I mean, that's like, whew.
Although I still say that as far as makeup effects for a low budget film and everything, that was pretty good. But like I still say the effect that it's how do you realistically do that? I don't know how you fake it without just doing it for real, which is the snake coming out of the mouth. I was like, oh, that's nice and nasty. Well, but you know what I mean? It's like, how do you really fake that without making like a fake head or something? Which that didn't look like a fake head to me.
At least they didn't kill one like they did in the Friday.
They didn't do that. But I always wondered about that, making snakes fall out of the mouths. Like, okay, are you trying? This seems to be a trope in movies, and I've never gotten it. It's like that's not at all realistic.
Well, that also did not look. It didn't look cool. Like a. Well, it also didn't look like it was a dangerous snake.
Well, it wasn't. It was a northern water snake. That was absolutely what it was. Which in that area of New York,
it's crawling out of your corpse face. It's grody. Like that's the point. I realize the snake probably isn't all in.
That's kind of funny because they were
in New York.
They were talking about.
Where is this in New York? Is that like upland, or is it middle of the state, or?
It's in Argyle, New York, which is just north of Albany.
Okay.
I live on Long Island. I was born here, but I actually grew up upstate in Syracuse, which is in the dead middle of the state.
Right. So
it's kind of funny. In the scene before that, they were talking about don't let the water snakes get you, and then like a water snake comes out of his mouth.
They wait until they're dead first, and then that's the idea.
Oh wow! So I just thought I'd look it up, and Albany has a town to the west of it called Voorheesville. That's awesome.
And actually, the opening scene was filmed in Lake Luzerne, which is in Warren County, which is the county where Smith's Grove from Halloween was.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in Ohio.
Illinois.
So we're supposed to. Yeah, Illinois. It's not in Illinois. It's fucking liars.
Well, if you want a bit of trivia, actually, the real camp where Friday the 13th was in New Jersey. It's actually in Warren County, and about 105 miles south of it is Haddonfield, New Jersey.
There you go.
Jersey
Mike.
Well, anyway, long and short, I'd have to double check my range maps, but I'm pretty sure that part of New York, maybe Copperheads, maybe Timber Rattlesnake, maybe Massasauga. Yeah. I think those are the only three dangerous ones in New York.
But I should have thrown a rattlesnake in there with those kids. That would have been awesome.
I know that we've talked about a lot of the different genders stuff, a lot of the different characters, but did we go through a rundown of the basic plot?
No, we haven't started it.
That would be kind of just hitting characters, I guess.
I mean, yeah, it's really just a lot of it is just pretty. It's a pretty standard,
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty episodic,
We should talk about that opening scene, because that opening scene was messed up.
Great. Yeah, plot's easy. I mean, she just goes to camp, gets teased, some kids get killed, kid gets throttled, snake crawls out of mouth, and that's finale.
And there's a lot of trash talking, a lot of language, a lot of early pubescent exploring of what it means to be a young boy and a young girl, all that stuff.
Yeah, pretty sure some good Polaroids get taken.
Yeah.
I think that was more the second movie with the Polaroids.
Oh, that is the second movie. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, those little kids, those little scamps.
Hey, Emilio.
Oh.
That opening scene though with the water skier and them running over him with the boat is just because that stuff happens, man. You live on the river here, you see that like once a year. Somebody like kills some dude on a jet ski or something because they're not looking where they're going.
I never connected the boat kill at the beginning to the end the first time. It took the second time before I recognized it and connected it.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's something. So help me clear this up. So the person that we saw, it was Angela and her, what was that, brother? Yeah, who would have cousin hit. That was
Angela and her brother at the beginning.
At the beginning, yes.
Accident.
Well, but then, like in the flashback, you had the two dads or whatever. I assume that was the woman's husband that she said, the aunt was like, when my husband left, oh, that's all water under the bridge, as I always say, water under the bridge, which is like we heard you the first fucking time. But I assume that is what her husband was up to. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I thought maybe she was the brother of one of them. I mean, she was the sister of one of them. I mean, yeah, that whole family tree is never quite.
No. I feel like they did say something about see the doctor or something in that first scene.
Yeah,
so
they know. Yeah, and more there's a doctor. That's really
right. So maybe that is the case. Maybe her husband was sneaking off with the other guy. I hadn't really fully gotten that myself, but it seems like it's a possibility. Mm-hmm. But whatever the case, those kids were jerks.
It could be another possible red herring there. It's just again, it was just trying to have the mythology of the thing make some kind of sense.
But but you got to admit, any movie that has a small child run over by a motorboat in the opening scene is that's not something you see very often.
Nah. And also the girl that was like and then again in the Cinema Star review, like that clip plays and he's
is going to come into play at some point because that's just how movies like that tend to work.
You don't do something like that in the opening scene if it's not going to factor in.
Kill your mother.
As tempting as it is to just run kids over with motorboats, you got to have it serve a purpose to the plot, I suppose. I mean, I'd like to meet the guy who just casually throws that in there. Damn the context, but it plays out pretty good, you know what I mean? And they do a fair job of you not quite knowing which kid got it, So it sets up the whole twist, In
all fairness, I was probably not in the best condition watching it the first time. So probably half asleep and half other. So I probably missed a few things the first time I saw it. Still quite remembered that last part first time. So connecting them might not have been the best thing for my mental capacity at the time.
Right.
All right, and
I don't know who else is in there that we haven't hit really. I mean, I think we got all the main characters for the most part. Other than that,
yeah. I mean, the bratty kids. You got the cousin, who of course is the main red herring, at least by the camp head, because he's like, it's gotta be him. I see him. He's upset because they're picking on his sister.
I see it in his eyes.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, this poor kid, he's getting like all this. It's like a red herring from Pup Main Scooby-Doo, and But Fred's always picking on him. It's like, it's him. It's gotta be him. I do kind of feel sorry for him in many ways. Not just that, but the girl that he thought he had a good line on. Of course, she developed, and therefore she's like, "Oh, don't need you anymore." And
toss him on trash. He gets picked on by the head counsel by the head counselor.
Didn't say before Judy's a bitch.
Yeah,
I mean, he basically spends most of the time just having to defend his cousin because everybody's just so hostile towards her.
Yep, defending his cousin and playing pranks. That's kind of his. That's pretty much his MO.
Well, and all the boys and girls too, they're all just like, fuck off, and you fucking pricks, and this and that.
Die.
Yeah, exactly, which I can tell that there's probably a good chunk of the audience for, like, the people that really love this and similar movies are like, yeah, that's how me and my friends talk to each other, which is undoubtedly the case, but also it's like, you know, it's one of those things where you want movies to reflect, you know, the audience's experience in some way, so that way they connect. And it does kind of make you wonder, again, it's like if one were to try to make a movie like this again, you know, nowadays, and set it, you know, cast actual adolescents and stuff, there's probably a lot of stuff you couldn't do today, but then also you'd have to introduce like sexting, and you know, you might actually have the kids call each other worse things for all we know. There's all kinds of room for it, but I think that aspect of it has not changed. If anything, that aspect's probably gotten worse over time.
All right. Mm-hmm. And, is that all? I think that's pretty much it for the main characters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about special? Okay, so special effects.
We should probably cover the rest of the story, though. I mean, just as a basic thing, because you have several areas. You've got the little social. You've got the little relationship between Angela and the one kid who's not total ass.
Yeah.
That was actually one thing I was going to talk about, because we talked about sexual politics or whatever. So you've got this fairly ordinary, certainly for the time, fairly ordinary, you know, not as asshole-ish kid, you know, trying to talk to the, you know, quiet girl or whatever, but he really just wants to get in her pants, but he's not, like, as bad about it as he could be, but he's also not a saint either, because he, you know, immediately goes to Judy because she looks like she's going to be willing to put out, you know, and oh, she's such a prude and everything, and, you know, it's one of those things where, like, he's slightly less horrible than his peers, but he's also, you know, just wanting, you know, he wants some pussy just like any other kid his age and all that stuff, and it's just like, well, that's another aspect of it that is certainly true to life, certainly true to the time, but it does not necessarily make him the most sympathetic person in the world, and, you know, but that is something that really does happen, especially at that age.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so is the fact that she opens up to him when he's really just about the only one. There's that one other female counselor who's at least kind of decent to her, but for the most part, he's really the only guy other than her cousin who just talks to her, who actually tries to converse with her. Everyone else is, oh, you're weird. I don't want anything to do with you. Yeah. So naturally, she latches on to the one that is willing to take the time to talk to her, and yeah.
Well, and I like that she does open up to him, but she doesn't do like the thing that kind of fucked me up as a young man, and I assume fucked up a lot of young men when we're watching movies and stuff. I like the fact that she does open up to him, but she doesn't, like, you know, fall head over heels for him. She doesn't, like, give up her reason or whatever. She has her boundaries. She has her things that she doesn't want him to do and all that stuff. And, like, that was a problem with other movies that certainly didn't do me any favors when I was trying to show interest in girls or whatever, because I expected a lot more than what you realistically get.
There was another thing about the relationship that I think was important, is it pointed out, it really did give you a point towards the end. It was allowing you to see a little bit more, gave you another strong hint as to what the ending was going to be. Because again, you could tell Angela was wanting to be in some sort of relationship, but then that flash hit, and then it was like, no, that's wrong, and suddenly that was like, no, I can't do this, and it came in. And again, it's that kind of repression, almost torturous treatment that she had gotten from in her raising, because she was obviously traumatized in multiple ways, being raised by this kind of sadistic high mother,
Mental
mother.
patient.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's I think it was a good window into it, especially if you're watching it for the second time and you were able to look and say, hey, okay, that's a very strong. Why didn't I see that sign right away? That just to me that's just something that you want to make sure that that relationship should definitely not be glossed over. Also the ending, because the ending itself, not just the kind of reveal, but just everything, the slaughter, the fire, everything coming together at the end. That should also not be glossed over either, as far as this is going, because that changes a lot of people's attitudes towards this, for better or for worse.
Well, the ending can have a lot to do with one's impression of a movie, that is for sure. I was watching a movie last week called Asako Ichitani. Really great movie up until 20 minutes from the end, where Asako makes one of the dumbest moves of any movie character I've ever seen, and it wrecked the entire movie. Like, I hate when that happens.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah. This one was a little different because the big twist was right at the end, so it was like you're left with it.
Yep.
But it was
for the rest of your days. I will say this about it, all jokes aside, and the infamy it gets for, the reason. The ending would be fucking bone-chilling even if she didn't have a wiener, bro. Like, that's just the way it builds up to it is terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I wanted to include the fire, everything that goes on. I mean, that just shows the level of just like, she's dedicated to basically everything's going to burn.
Yeah, like like she hacks up all those little kids camping in the woods. Kills, fires an arrow right through Mel's throat. And then takes out.
We didn't talk about the beehive. That was a good one.
Oh, yeah.
There are too many bees for that little nest, though.
Yeah.
As far as the size, because those were like full-grown, like giant honeybees that were crawling over her, and that was one.
Bees are less fortunate, Brandon. They don't all have palatial hives. Okay.
That was not a honeybee nest.
They sleep 3 to a bed. You know what I mean?
Now, I admit it would probably be a lot harder to cover somebody in hornets.
Yeah, probably.
Because that might be more dangerous towards a person. Just like they're just a tad more aggressive. But that was a bit harder. But of course, hey, call back to our previous film, Candyman, that we discussed.
Yeah. We've been doing a lot of bee stuff, haven't we?
No, not the bees! Not the bees!
I mean, we did touch on it briefly, but I really like how that kill under the canoe plays out. Like, that's just a cool way they did it with them popping up, and I think he says, like, oh, it's you. And then, it's sort of like a riff on what happens in Friday the 13th with the whole Jeep at the sign and the dude with his sweet mustache gets poked. But it was cool, coming up from under the water, and you really couldn't tell who it was from behind, all wet like that, because,
But you knew it was one. You felt like it was. You could feel it was one of the downtrodden or one of the bullied kids. The problem is there were a lot of them.
Yeah. I don't think we even mentioned Mozart. He was that poor kid.
Yeah.
Oh, the
So
dirty,
it could have been-
dirty kid getting shaving cream in the face. And, but he's out. He's when they're playing baseball, he's in the outfield playing a handheld game, and
Hey, he caught that ball.
Caught it.
You know what, though? That kid probably grew up to be a brony.
Probably one of those OG brownies, dude.
Probably.
Yeah.
The original show wasn't bad.
Probably.
Hey, if Wet Hot American Summer taught us anything, D&D kids, they can save the world.
Exactly. Yes.
Indeed.
And also,
man,
trips into town never take more than an hour, no matter what you do.
Convenient looking, man.
Yes.
I think we hit all the plot. We hit all the. Did we hit all the?
We didn't mention the particularly nasty way Judy was dispatched, which was appropriate for her, but
Well, she got the curl, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh man.
I tried to avoid that one.
It's like when you
boy.
see the killer pick it up, you're like, oh, I know where this is going.
Good stuff.
I'm glad they didn't show so much with that.
Yeah, that's one where, just the implication is enough, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, they probably put all their money in that one effect.
Yeah. Well, I think this one would have had a little more to do with just financial concerns. I think the censors would have said a thing or two.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
But, yeah.
I mean, I think overall the special effects are good, though, for what they're doing with them.
For what little money they had for special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, they spent it all on that first kill. I mean,
I don't know. I think it all does a good job to build towards that ending. I mean, it's like you feel at the end like even the first time you watch it, you feel like there is going to be some insane reveal. And really, as soon as they're walking up to her on the beach, sitting there, like something bad has happened.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need the stand up in the creepy growl and the whole shebang there.
Yeah.
To know that there's something bad on the other side of this kid here.
oh yeah.
And
That ending definitely reminds me of. Now, have any of you seen the original House on Haunted Hill, where the old lady was like wheeled in to the hallway? Well, I feel like it's almost like they kind of did like some kind of a wheeled effect where they just kind of, while she was growling, she was wheeling backwards or something like that, because it was like a slow motion effect, and like that House of Wax moment when you realize that the people are in wax and she's just looking at it.
it's unsettling, man. I mean, there's something about that growl. It's a genius choice, Like, honestly, that's the part of it that I think, the look on her face, that sound, like, that's all infinitely more scarier, unsettling. The Franken beans are just a bonus, man. Like, that whole ending would have been insane without that, Like, she could have been wearing some badass plum smugglers like our head counselor there, and it wouldn't have mattered,
In a way, it kind of reminds me of the character in Mama.
Somebody's got some computer noise going on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
It was kind of
but
muffled.
it sounded weird.
Okay, yeah, it keeps kicking me off. It kicked me off for like 20 minutes.
Huh.
I'm sorry, dude.
Shut down. It's like the screen's all weird. So
That can happen. Skype is not as stable as it should be.
yeah, because I've been off for probably like 20 or 25 minutes, but trying to get back on, it keeps shutting down.
Did you have anything that you wanted to say about the plot before we moved on? We were talking about special effects, but did you have anything about the plot you wanted to hit?
Trying to think. Hold on, I'm sorry, hold on a second. My computer's doing weird.
While you're thinking, I just wanted to add something I forgot to mention in my first impression. I actually had this movie spoiled by Robot Chicken. They did like a montage of I don't know what the point of it was, but it was like the skit was literally just you know Angela standing there with a big black bar across like her lower body that just said penis. There's like a counselor shouting, "Oh my God, Angela was the killer and she was a boy." And it just kind of appeared in one episode. It was very strange.
And I will say this: this is one thing, because a lot of people look at this and say that the trans thing could be insulting to a lot of people. But I wanted to put it out under this point. Angela really didn't have much of a choice but to be where she was in that. It wasn't necessarily saying that she was trans, especially at the time. The later movies were a bit...
They explicitly said it.
Because of that. But that first movie, a lot of that was not necessarily her. It was that her aunt really screwing with things. So a lot of things, it's just, I think that also could be said. So that could also be one reason why people aren't necessarily as hard on this as others.
I could see how it could be embraced, too, man. I mean, you could look at it. It all depends on your interpretation, like Forrest said. I mean, obviously it's caught on with elements of the LGBTQ community.
Homoerotic stuff there.
Well, you know, as an umbrella term, I would imagine there's some trans people that dig it, you know, because you could interpret it as she was forced to live as something she wasn't, and at the end, she's standing there proud, severed head in hand, dick out for all to see, like, I am who I am, and you have to accept me because I just killed everyone.
Again, we should read that article.
Yeah, you could look at it multiple ways, and I will be reading that article, Dustin.
I read about the first half of it as we started. It's pretty interesting.
Let's go back to Chris's thoughts. Did you have anything that you may have wanted to add, Chris?
Well, I kind of lost track of the conversation. I'm sorry. I lost track of the conversation. It's been off for 25, 30, it's probably been like 25. I wasn't sure where you guys are at, because I was having like all these sound problems.
Were there any plot points you personally wanted to touch on?
Yeah, we kind of finished the plot, so...
But if there was anything about the plot that you wanted to add, now would be probably the time for you to add it.
Nothing I can think offhand. I'm sorry about that. My computer's just acting up. I don't know if it's because we have the cold temperatures and it keeps doing this. I apologize. I'm sorry. It keeps quitting on me for some reason.
No worries, bud. It happens.
No worries. Man, did you have anything maybe about the special effects that maybe you might have noticed while you were watching the film?
Nothing that I can think of offhand. I thought they were well done as far as, I guess, and I like the last two murder scenes I liked, and then, the final murder scene with the severed head I liked a lot, too.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely not something that you can forget. That's for sure.
What about the music? Did anybody have anything about the music? That would be...
Well, I do have the ending. I do have the closing song on my iTunes. The song from the credits.
Mm-hmm. This is a good song.
It's a good overall score, I guess. There's parts where it's all real like frantic, you know what I mean? Yes. Like the title sequence is a good example of that, where it's just he was sending it, man. Like, you could tell this guy was just trying to make it as wild as possible at parts, and I think he did a good job. It's not a score for me that is like one I would go back. Like, it's probably not one I'd like spin the vinyl were it to exist in my collection a bunch. You know, there's other ones that I would go to first, but it's not terrible by any means. You know.
Yeah, so
I think
The end credits theme is pretty catchy.
Yeah.
I mean, the strong. I think a strong opener, strong ender, but not so much in between.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's kind of the movie in a nutshell, isn't it? Because it's got a lot of, it's got some standout moments, but just, you know, my biggest complaint about the movie and the score and this and that, the moments that are good do tend to be punctuate. They are the things that punctuate the otherwise just a lot of incidents, a lot of just things that happen that I assume are meant to reflect the summer camp experience, but they're just not all that interesting or all that consequential. It's just mostly like, I do think to a certain extent that's kind of the fact that, well, it was a low budget and people are not really the most experienced with movie making, but like, you know, and especially with a lot of those summer camp movies of like the 70s and 80s, I think a lot of it was what Quentin Tarantino would call a hangout movie. You know, that it's not really so much about driving a plot forward as much as it is hanging out with these people. And that can work for certain kinds of movies, assuming that the hanging out part is interesting in some way. But, like, in this case, it's just a lot of stuff that kind of happens that, you know, eventually gets punctuated by killings and stuff. It's like the stuff that happens that is summer campish, it's just kind of goes on for a long time, and it's not... The characters, outside of some standout ones, it's like the vast majority of them are like, you know, they don't make as much of an effort. That's probably the biggest complaint that I have about it, is that for as many standout moments as it has, that most of it is just like, okay, let's get on with it.
All right. Well, yeah.
I guess favorite scenes or moments. Should we go? Yeah.
I think I'm just gonna, you know, stick with old Pedo getting boiled in the kitchen there. I mean, that's just it's hard for that not to be kind of the stand. That or the severed, the dead head with the snake under the canoe. Like those, or just the whole canoe thing is probably actually my favorite moment where I had to choose. Coolest effect, obviously, is that dude getting boiled. He's all blistery and shit. That's always fun. Sure, that corn was well cooked, but that snake coming out of that head was just, it's good stuff. You know, I get that, you know, I've often thought, like, how often do rodents or snakes just crawl into corpses? Is that really a thing? Maybe not. They're more likely to just be chewing on it or something in the case of a rodent. I don't know if a snake would even mess with a corpse, but probably not. God, does it look cool. It looks like one of those tattoos that you would get, like a snake crawling through a skull. You know, you get the little temporary tattoo in the quarter machine. Or, you know, in the case of this, like, if you just freeze frame it right there, it's like a badass death metal cover, so it's hard not to enjoy that. That'd be mine.
Yep. Okay. Jake, what was your favorite? Do you have a favorite scene or character?
Kind of hard to say, really. It's easier to. Not really sure there was a particularly standout scene in terms of a favorite. I guess as far as characters, Angela probably was one of my favorites, just in terms of being less, even though she was a psycho killer, being less of a douchebag than most of the others. But, yeah.
Okay, Brandon, do you have any favorites?
Let's see. So for me, I like the pedophile guy getting his. It does have I have a hard time looking at the way they dwell on that. effect, but I understand probably with the cost that went into it. Mo's probably right. Mo, it was Dane saying you're probably right that they want to dwell on that because they probably spent the majority of the movie on that one in the end. So, to me, I kind of like it when those people get their comeuppance.
Dane, favorites?
I wrapped it around my finger. Like that whole scene with her, it's like, I don't know why, it's just like she stands out. She's such a sore thumb in this thing, but it's like, as a character, I would love to see her fit into a John Waters movie or something, but like, she's so fucking weird and so like played bizarrely that I'm like, that person belongs in a whole other movie, but like, she's a standout, I think. But for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, but her acting, like her delivery, her character, the writing, everything, I don't know what it is, but it's just so weird that it just somehow works for me, and I think it's mostly because she's... It's fascinating, but also it's like, this person really is an escaped mental patient. Is an escaped mental patient, isn't she? Or she's off her meds, or she's on all of the meds that there are. Yeah. I don't know which it is, but it's like, she does have...
Like Mo was saying earlier, she's a doctor and she took her own supply.
I guess so, but she's just got that, 1,000-yard stare, and she's got the voice and the weird delivery, the sing-songy kind of voice, and it's just like, are you like a Stepford wife that went a little haywire, even by their standards? Like, what are you,
I wonder what direction she was given, just like, be weird.
I don't know, but again, it's like, I've not seen a person act like that in any other movie, so that does kind of warrant its own little shout-out,
Just as a heads up, Chris did want to throw out his favorite scene. He liked most of the scenes that took place between Angela and Paul, just seeing their reactions.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Dustin, favorites?
I think my favorite thing might surprise you guys. I think my favorite thing is the B corpse.
That's nice.
It looks sufficiently disgusting and very heavily damaged.
And no, not the bees. Not the bees.
It is a good B corpse. It's one of the better ones I've seen.
Yeah, it is. Dave, favorites?
I would have to say, that one of my favorite scenes would probably be the moment where Meg was getting killed in the shower scene. That was kind of a cool moment. I like the fact that it looked like they were tearing the knife through some kind of like cardboard like white thing and going back and forth.
When she was like sawing her like through the wall of the shower.
Yeah, and then the fact when Mel came in, it looked like she actually did kind of a small step leap to fall to the floor, and you saw that whole gash down her back, and I would have to say the bullying was done well, even though I thought that Judy, she wasn't exactly as pretty as you might have thought when you actually saw close up to the camera. Her, I don't know, something about her nose just was off.
Well, again, she was totally Real Housewives of Sleepaway Camp kind of acting and the look about her and everything.
But, yeah.
I was like how in Friday the 13th, the whole problem was they neglected the kid and he like drowned in the lake. Mm-hmm. And this one, a counselor fucking throws a kid in the lake. It's a different approach,
Yeah.
I dig it.
All right, and for me, I would say I have to kind of agree with the general consensus with the pedophile crook getting it. First of all, it's always nice. It's good to see a predator get their comeuppance, and also it just looks look. It's a great effect. I like the great effect with the skin bubbling. I think that looked pretty cool. Actually, I have to agree with Dustin too. Even the bee scene is. Actually, the bee kill is really a very underrated kill. I mean, actually, they did a really good job with the makeup on that.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good makeup in this, surprisingly. So with the budget they had, they did a lot.
Mm-hmm. Most assuredly. Just trying to get Chris's perspective on his favorites.
I got it up there. That's what I put out there. But also, just because he won't necessarily be able to be there for the next one, to check out Light and Shadow on YouTube. Hopefully there'll be some new stuff up in the future, but there's some amazing stuff there. And he has a blogger channel also, which
cinematic musings.
So definitely worth checking out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. So, other than that, did anyone else have anything else to add?
Not particularly.
I think it's one of those movies that, yes, it would be very easy to sit there and just watch it and dissect it with the lens of today. But I think sometimes these old movies, like they were intended to be unsavory. You just gotta let them be unsavory, So don't let it, whether it is problematic or not, ruin the experience of the movie for you. It's worth seeing at least once, maybe a second time. It does have that built-in replay value, like Brandon was mentioning, where you can pick up the little hints that you maybe missed the first time. So it's worth going through. It's sleazy and it's intentionally sleazy.
My philosophy on that is I try to do this sort of thing. I always try to
no, you're crashing.
Look at it through the intended lens of the time. Try to put oneself in the audience's seat of the time, and also you don't forget about the time in which you're seeing it. At the present time, and the differences between the two, because obviously there's a pretty significant world of difference between the two. And that kind of comprises the final analysis of the thing, is the differences. And that's because films, whether they're fictional or not, they are kind of a document of where we are at a particular point in our history. So they're kind of important on that level.
True enough, but to my point, like, you still enjoyed the movie on various levels. You tread the line. Be analytical about it. Don't just go into it and see some shit and be like, oh, this is like problematic trash, and give up on it, because there's some good stuff in there, It's not the best slasher movie ever, but it's memorable.
Yeah, you give credit where credit's due, and you dock points where it's due, or you say that was then, this is now. That's just what you do with films.
Exactly. Still a wonderful trilogy if you enjoy a good slasher.
Oh yeah,
yeah, some good hair metal in the sequels too.
Yes, who knows? Maybe we'll revisit this in Sleepaway Camp too.
I personally think that this is a good trilogy to mouth through every so often. I enjoy returning to it from time to time.
Watch it once. Yeah, for me, it's an annual rewatch. Gotta watch it at least once a year.
At least. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Stay awake, as I hope that you eventually check out this film. Don't just take our word for it. But we are going to be continuing our local themed film discussions, as you would join us on our Inside Movies Galore channel as we discuss a local film from my hometown. Well, not necessarily from my hometown, my home state, as it is Gags the Clown. And don't gag too much.
No list this episode from our regional horror book, because it's just too damn long for us. So I'm just going to tell the people to, go ahead and look at Slime City.
I have to protest this whole outing though a little bit because Sleepaway Camp did not put me to sleep and Gags the Clown did not make me want to gag. So false advertising.
Oh, now Slime City is also covered by this channel, so there you go.
Did it cover you with slime though? I think not. False advertising.
I came close.
Slime in there.
It came close.
Some Himalayan yogurt.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.